All right, we are concluding today our look at George Washington, Forging of a Nation. So pay attention to what happens as Washington wraps up his time as president.
Gracious as his predecessor was cantankerous. But how can any man not be sunny in spirit with such a beautiful young lady at his side?
Oh dear, that's the second time you've made me blush. I hardly deserve such a compliment.
Well, forgive me, I'm not intending to embarrass you.
You know, I enjoy compliments. But I'm afraid I've been too bold, especially at such early acquaintance. To have come here today using that gift as a pretext, hoping that you'd be here. Yes, it's true. I'm fascinated by your greatness.
Now you made me blush.
Oh, I know you're merely a man, flawed like all others. That's exactly why I'm so intrigued by that special quality that sets a man or a woman apart.
I am, madam, in all respects, ordinary.
Ordinary is the last word in the world, I don't. And madam sounds so distant. You must call me Henrietta.
No, I don't think it's...
Do you know you were the great bogeyman in my youth? The terrible ogre who led the foolish, misbegotten colonies in treasonous rebellion against God and King.
I had no idea.
Yeah, instead he used to frighten their little charges into eating porridge. That wicked George Washington. Yeah.
I'm sure it's the same with good Jeffersonian mothers who frighten their children in the same.
How can everyone not want to praise your name to the heavens for your determination to bring peace among all nations? I know you are hurt by the shouts of irrational men, but at such times forgive me. I want to take you in my arms and just hold you. I don't know why I did that, but forgive me.
No. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, I'm here not to talk to thee, but of your extraordinary farewell address you've written. I hope this version that I'm prepared for your consideration captures your true spirit.
Well, before we look at this conversation concerning his farewell address, I want to look at some of the main points of it. They don't talk about everything here. So I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint slide to help us to look through the details of what Washington said in his farewell address. Contrary to what you might think when you consider something called a farewell address, and this was not delivered orally before Congress or anyone else. This was something that was published in a newspaper on September the 26th, 1796. So this is a couple of months before, or a month and a half before, elections would be held to name his successor. So he's already planning on his exit, and he has some things to say to the American people concerning that exit and concerning the future of the country. So let's look at some of the main ideas of this address, in this address. First, he extols the benefits of the federal government. He talks about the need for federal government. Remember, those that opposed that, largely the Jeffersonians, wanted to emphasize states' rights. And Washington's pointing out, no, we need a strong central government. We really do. He says this: the unity of government is a main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. So those that are crying out the loudest for their liberty, Washington points out the only way you're going to have that liberty is with a central government, a federal government that's strong enough to protect you from forces within and without that would take away those liberties. So he's pointing out that those that are so concerned about losing their liberty ought to be glad that there is a government that will ensure that. All right, any comments there? You can sense some of the past disputations that he has had with the Jeffersonians, and certainly some of the attacks that they've made upon him in this statement. The next main idea he talks about is a warning against the party system. You know, he certainly had to deal with that. He says this: it serves to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration, agitates the community with ill-founded jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one against another. It opens the door to foreign influence and corruption. Thus, the policy and the will of one country are subjected to the policy and will of another. Wow, that really can be seen in our situation today, with the political parties going at one another and not wanting to give in to the other side purely on the basis of politics, not on the basis of what's good for the country. And so one of the situations we have today are that there are many people in one party that a few years ago voted lots of money to building a wall between the United States and Mexico, but now they're opposed to spending even less money to build a wall. Why? Simply because that's what the president wants, and they're going to be against anything he wants, and they're standing firm on that, even though before they supported it. You know, those kind of animosity doesn't make the country any better. It doesn't protect the country at all. And we've seen opening the door to foreign influence and corruption. There are all these accusations that Russia influenced our election, and actually the Chinese probably have more influence in putting out misinformation than even the Russians do. By the way, just as an aside, did the Russians try to influence our election? Well, yeah, they have been for the last 80 years or 90 years. Or, you know, they've always been doing that. They've always had people putting things in the newspaper to try to influence people to vote the way that the Soviet government back then wanted them to vote. We've always had spies. And we've had people in our government, in governmental positions, that were operating under the direction of the Soviet Union, even reaching to the Vice President of the United States under Franklin Roosevelt. So were they trying to influence? Yeah. But were they actually able to change any votes? Did they cast ballots? No, of course not. No, that would have been impossible. So the fact that these political parties are at one another so much also leads to influence and corruption from foreign nations as well. All right, so you can see how prescient Washington was in a lot of what he had to say. Any comments before we go on to this next point? His next point is he stressed the importance of religion and morality. What? In government? How can that be? He says, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life? It's if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths, which are the instruments of investigation in courts of justice. Interesting. Oh, where was this? I just saw recently that I think it was in a particular state that there now is a law pending which would take away the "So help me God" from oaths, so that you no longer have to swear to God that you're telling the truth. Well, you know, people ceased believing that for a long time, but they're now making it official. His next point is on stable public credit. He says, cherish public credit. One method of preserving it is to use it as sparingly as possible. In other words, going into debt, borrowing money from the people in order to run the government. avoiding likewise the accumulation of debt. It is essential that you bear in mind that towards the payments of debts there must be revenue. What's that mean? What's that last statement mean? You know the word revenue? Income. So in other words, if you're going to go in debt, you've got to have enough income to cover it. Isn't that true of every individual, of every family? If you buy a house, if you buy a car, and you go into debt to do that, what do you have to make sure you are able to do? Have enough income to pay for that, right? Unfortunately, our government has become used to simply going into debt without any means of paying for it. It has become something that is so common that we have representatives like Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, and this recent Congresswoman, AOC, she's known as, who are advocating all kinds of spending without any idea as to how it would conceivably pay for all these things. Free health care for everyone, free college education for everyone. Well, there is no such thing as free. Somebody has to pay for it, right? Even when you go to some store that's offering something free, well, it's not really free. They're paying for it. You may not be, but they are. Somebody has to pay for it. And Washington says, make sure you got enough revenue to cover any debt. Don't go into debt. Of course, Washington lived before the advent of John Maynard Keynes, who pointed out to the world, and it seems like the whole world has embraced the idea that going into debt is a good thing. You know, you by printing more money, and which causes inflation, that will stimulate the economy. And it worked so well in Germany in the 1930s that it allowed a dictator like Hitler to come in. All right, and it worked so well in our country that we have stymied our economy many times over the great debt. Okay, continue. To have revenue, there must be taxes. That no taxes can be devised which are not inconvenient and unpleasant. So the only way you're going to get revenue is by taxes, and nobody likes taxes. So don't go into debt that you can't pay for, because if you do that, you're going to have to raise taxes, and people are not going to be happy. Any comments there? Next, he warns against permanent foreign alliances. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. And you can understand why he would have said that, because at the time, there were two major world powers with which the United States had to deal, which were what?
France and Britain.
Right, France and Great Britain. And to ally the United States with one would have meant probably war with the other, because they were always going at one another. So you can understand his reason for advocating neutrality. I don't think that you can apply this necessarily to our situation today, where we do have alliances with other countries for their mutual, our mutual and theirs defense, security, things like that. But it is something to be aware of, because being allied with a foreign nation can get you into trouble as well. We can see that very clearly in what leads up to World War I in Europe. The alliances between nations plunged the whole Europe and then the whole world into war. So Washington warns against foreign alliances. Any question or comment there? The next thing Washington says in his farewell address is that he talks about an overpowerful military establishment. He said, avoid the necessity of those overgrown military establishments which under any form of government are inauspicious to liberty and which are to be regarded as particularly hostile to Republican liberty. What's he saying? If the military gets too strong, you're going to lose your freedoms. And a Republican form of government is not going to last. You know, and you can see this example many times in history, and I think particularly of France, of how France lost their liberties when they became so chaotic that they turned to a dictator, an emperor, so-called, called himself Napoleon Bonaparte. But anytime the military has too much control, and there have been those that have thought that that has been the case in our country from time to time. In fact, it's interesting that President Eisenhower warned against the military-industrial complex. He said the power that the military and industry have together it can take us into war. And some think that that was a driving force behind our being involved in Vietnam. That's a debate for others to take up. But watch out for a strong military. All right, so those are the main points of Washington's address. Now let's return to his talking with Hamilton, as Hamilton is helping him to write this farewell address that will be published for the American people.
Thank you for all of your hard work on this. Friends and fellow citizens.
The opening about all the abuses in newspapers, yet you'll pass over them in hindsight.
I mean, I sounded like some frantic, beleaguered old warrior who wants to see the stars. Face his enemy with his sword slashing, indulging in wounded pride. And I am willing to rid this of those unconscious egotisms. But to observe a virtuous nation, continuing the blessings that would encourage nations throughout the world to seek a similar.
You said it many times. Yes?
That's excellent. No, this, I cut this in. This smacks too much of effective monster. And make this here more to the point. Since the Constitution is a rock on which union rests, no branch of government should encroach on any other. Only experience, the surest standard.
Oh, no, sir. I think it's much stronger than clever. Listen. Experience. Absolutely right, sir.
You kept my warning against Protestant politics. Political contention is a fire not easily put out. We must guard against it, for instead of warming, it could destroy us. Why should the United States entangle our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition and rivalship interests, humor, or caprice?
A new declaration of independence from Europe.
Now, you're too gentle. You shouldn't have kept this about my not being moved by ambition or lust for power.
But it's true.
And that I've not gained but lost money in government service.
Sir, you have
nothing.
Take you have.
Good. You kept the fight. I anticipate the pleasing expectation of retirement, which I can enjoy in the midst of my fellow citizens. The benign influence of good laws under a free government, the happy reward of our mutual cares, labors, from Mount Vernon. Steve with us here in Philadelphia, the 2 terms of my presidency and you have served us very well. And now it's time to go home. Mrs. Washington and I, in gratitude for all that you've done, have decided to leave you here in the city, thereby granting you your freedom under Pennsylvania law.
Master Washington, I thank you.
There's a wonderful man here, Richard Allen, and a group of your own people called Free African Society will find employment for you as freedmen. Christopher will give you an envelope tomorrow with money to help you in your new way of life.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. We can talk to
I know. No. I shall miss you too. Oh, I thank you. You'll find a new life here. And your children won't grow up as slaves now. No. Should you ever find Holy Judge, would you tell her, please, that she can remain free? But Mistress Washington would like very much to see her again someday.
Excuse me, sir.
I've been thinking. I want to go back with you. It's Mount Vernon. I want to be with you to the end of your days.
Is that touching? What's happening?
It's difficult to believe. Your last night as president. Look sad. Lonely.
I am. It's because I don't understand. I tried my best to serve them. I wanted to leave behind people working together peacefully. And all we did was fight. I'm not sure we'll even survive. I failed. I failed.
Forget the newspaper slanders. Forget the angry voices. Remember only that for all of your life, in peace and war, you've done what your conscience told you must be done for the greater good of your country. It matters not what some of the people might think. It matters only that you know what you've accomplished. You brought this nation into being. You preserved its freedom. You kept it out of war. God knows, Mr. Washington. You've not failed. You've done magnificently.
Well, I don't want to interrupt the final scene here when a new president is sworn in, so we'll save that for tomorrow. What do you think about Martha's words to George there?
Encouraging.
They were encouraging. Do you understand why he would feel kind of down, depressed? Why he would think that he hadn't accomplished anything? What do you think? What do you think about Washington's accomplishments? He did so much more than he thought he did.
Things just like what everybody else thought he knew this was their thing to do. He did it,
So he didn't give in to public pressure. He did what he thought was right.
Well, yes, but people got all up in his face about it a lot, and so that makes them feel like, well, maybe I didn't do the right thing. This was a really bad idea.
Yeah. And especially with so much in the newspapers against him, you know, it seems. And don't we oftentimes take a few negative things and kind of blow it out of proportion? You ever do that? Well, I saved correspondence that I had received over the years, and especially when I was a pastor. And one day my wife found this folder full of all this correspondence, and she was looking at it and said, "Why are you keeping all these things?" Because a lot, there was some real negative things in there. She said, "All this can do is just make you feel badly to read this. Get rid of it." And I was glad she said that, you know, because going back over those things, you tend to amplify the negative voices and you don't listen to the positive voices. I think that's a natural human tendency, and that's what has happened here with Washington. And so Martha's trying to encourage him as he is coming to the end, that he has done a good job. Can you think of a couple of words maybe, or a couple of sentences to describe what you think are the greatest accomplishments of George Washington? I mean, maybe it's just a word that comes to mind, or a sentence. Any thoughts? You know, if you're out in the street, somebody's doing a street interview and said, "What do you think of George Washington?" What would you say? Michaela?
He was really courageous to just like take on this world president and represent a new nation and having to bring more of them because he did do that and he did do that.
Yeah, that's a good word, courageous. Well, young man, what do you think of George Washington's reign as president?
I think he accomplished a lot even before he was president. But
Even before he was president. Did he accomplish anything as president?
yeah, he kept peace between America and France and Britain.
Okay, so you think that was a major thing, is keeping peace between them? Young lady, what do you think about George Washington as president?
I think that he accomplished a lot of things and that like showed that he brought the nation together, like really unified it and started them to be.
Okay, he unified the nation, helped to bring it into being. Let's see, is there anybody else here that would like to comment on George Washington as president? In about 30 seconds. How about you, young lady?
I just thought it was really because he managed to keep peace between
Yeah, dealing with, especially in his own cabinet, right? And he still managed to keep it together, even though they eventually left, but keeping the peace between the factions in the country. was a major accomplishment. And the United States did progress economically, politically, as a country in the world stage during his presidency. All right. Well, tomorrow we will see what I think is an exciting conclusion. It might seem sort of anticlimactic, but wait until you see what happens. Will a fight break out between Jefferson and Hamilton?
Yeah.
Will... Oh, we'll have to see. Well, except go to third period.